Welcome to everyone for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Chris Ventura. I'm the CEO of Harness Projects. Now, for those of you joining us for the first time, Harness Projects is an education provider and we teach cybersecurity skills. Now, our courses follow a real project learning model where effectively our students get to work on live company challenges while we train them. We pride ourselves on being the only provider that can help students gain skills and experience all in the one course. So today we're joined by three of our leading industry mentors who guide students through our projects. They're here to share their insights on what it takes to break into a cybersecurity career. Now, we've had a ton of great questions come through from you all prior to the webinar. We're going to do our best to get to them each throughout the 1.5 hours that we have. Now, I've had a look at the questions and tried to break them down across 7 categories that we'll cover. So just quickly, that will be starting off with where to get started if you want to begin your cybersecurity career. Then we're going to move into what are some of the interpersonal skills that are really important for cyber candidates and not often spoken about. After that, we're going to talk about industry certifications. Do you need them? Which ones are important? We'll have a really interesting discussion about that. Fourth will be how real project experience can accelerate your entry into a cybersecurity career. We'll also look at a day in the life of a cybersecurity professional, what to expect from a role in cyber. We're also going to look at just general recruitment and hiring manager insights and tips, resumes, how to apply, how to, prepare for an interview, those sorts of things. And then we'll finish off with just a future look into what trends are emerging in the industry, particularly around AI and other things like that. Cool. So to kick things off, I want to welcome our 3 panelists to the webinar. I've asked each of them to speak for a few moments to introduce themselves to you, to also speak about how they landed their first job in cyber, and a little story about a recent hire that they've made to give you some insight into what real hiring managers are looking for. So first off the rank, I'm going to hand over to Efrain Orsini Jr., EJ, if you want to take it away and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'll always be first. I am Efrain Orsini Jr. I go by EJ. I am currently the Security Operations Director and Deputy CISO at SilverSky, which is an MSSP here in North Carolina. And I have a non-traditional entry into cybersecurity. So I was working as basically sales and some lightweight troubleshooting with Verizon. Cell phones, and I was there for a couple years. And one of my small businesses actually liked the way I had worked and decided they wanted to hire me on. Even after I told them I had no experience, they said it didn't matter. They liked the kind of the way I worked and the way I presented myself. Um, and they gave me a chance. So I was there for a little while, and then I ended up switching over to cybersecurity management in a similar vein. I was doing audiovisual right after that and worked with a military buddy who asked me to come to his cybersecurity company to help him kind of head up his SOC. And that was 5, 6 years ago. That's actually also where I met Austin. And then it's kind of been that way from here on out. And then the last question was a recent hire and kind of what we looked for. And this is very near to me because we've been hiring a lot lately. I think I hired 10 people recently, but the one person that stood out in my current SOC position was a woman. She interviewed and came in, and she didn't have the normal cybersecurity background, and she was just interviewing for a level 1 SOC analyst position, but she had actually come from sales, which was really interesting. She didn't know anything super technical before kind of starting her journey, and she joined a program kind of similar to the Harness Project. She learned about what a SOC analyst does, got herself a certification, but what was really key was that she was learning and growing on her own, right? She created a GitHub, and she was working in GitHub, just teaching herself some things, creating things on her Mac. And it showed those little green boxes within GitHub and commits made it obvious that she was continuing to hone and try and be in the cybersecurity world. And that just stuck out because there's a lot of people who want to do it, but don't know where to start. And she just found places to start rather than kind of waiting for someone to do it for her. But that is me.
Awesome. Thanks, EJ. That's a really interesting story. We had a graduate recently that followed a similar path to that, didn't have a background in cyber. So nice to see that's possible. Um, Great. And do you want to take it away and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks for that, Chris. Hi, I'm Anne Higgins. I am currently the Global Head of Cyber Risk at Bank of New York Mellon, BNY as we now call it. So I've been there almost 2 years, and it's sort of been a real roller coaster. Started with this much, now have this much, but it's great. I mean, very, very interesting work every single day, working with the most incredible cyber professionals I've probably ever worked with, some of the smartest people I've ever met. So learning something every day. I have a team right now of about 70, but definitely still growing. And we're really focused on junior talent, actually. The bank in general is focused on really mentoring and bringing up junior talent. And, you know, being a woman in the industry, I'm also very focused on diverse candidates, particularly women. Also, I'm Australian in a American environment, so understand what it's like to be a diverse candidate. So, you know, my background is technical. So I have a degree in computer science. I went to an Australian university, but ended up overseas pretty much straight away, traveling like a lot of Australians do. And over the course of about 6 years working at different financial institutions in Australia, ended up in Asia Pacific role, running 19 countries in Asia in IT risk, not actually cyber, but very close to it. And that led me to the global head office, which was in Chicago, to build some IT risk frameworks for them. Was a few years in Chicago working for Aon Corporation, and then got poached by JP Morgan, moved to New York, and actually ended up in cybersecurity through that. So I was found by the CISO at the time at JP Morgan, and he actually brought me in as his chief of staff to begin with, but sort of worked very, very hard and ended up leading all of their regulatory audit, you know, sort of GRC practice there for a while. Sort of moved into other financial institutions, so also worked at Wells Fargo and more notably before BNY SVB. So it was an interesting ride, but really I knew that the right position for me was always frontline. So when we think about the 3 lines of defense, definitely frontline. So working within the teams and within the controls in cybersecurity. I just love the dynamic environment. So that was my foray in. And then to your other question of recent hires. So we've been hiring a lot, as I said, you know, notably sort of entry level. Obviously, some of the positions that we take require some degree of experience, but for the most part, given my role is really sort of governance, risk, and controls based, I feel that with the right candidate, I can teach them most of what they need to know. If they understand a technical environment, I can teach them how to do the tasks that I have under my portfolio. And so I really look for people who are highly motivated, initiative driven, can operate, you know, without a lot of sort of hand holding, and come to me with more solutions than questions, you know. Of course, we're happy to answer questions at all times, but, you know, just really sort of, you know, inquisitive people who want to work hard. And honestly, that and working with integrity are sort of my 2 biggest triggers when I'm interviewing people. You know, I like to get a sense of that. And so for a specific story, I actually entered a mentor program with Bank of New York Mellon, and the candidate that I mentored, you know, we had coffee a couple of times, and he just struck me as someone who wanted to work really hard. He wanted to learn, and he was not in it for a job or anything like that. He genuinely came in for a mentor relationship. I said, so hang on, your university's across the road? Yes. I said, would you maybe want to come and help us a couple of days a week? I said, really? So anyway, we hired him in, and he's been one of the most wonderful hires we've had. We actually offered him a full-time position just a couple of weeks ago. and he's moving actually out of state with, his wife took a role somewhere. So we're actually going to lose him, and it's actually a real shame because, we sort of trained him up on everything that he needed to know, and he's now a little superstar. So yeah, I think obviously a level of technical knowledge is important, but I think for me it's really the attitude and the work ethic is equally as important.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne. That's a really interesting story, and to hear your background as well. That was helpful context. Thanks so much. Austin, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Austin Phillips. I'm the security engineering manager here at DataScan, which is located in Alpharetta, Georgia. We are a risk management platform focused on really working the wholesale lending space, working with financial institutions such as JP Morgan Chase, and helping build out applications for their lending side of the business. So I, like EJ, actually did not have a traditional entry into the field. I did not go to college. I actually started working frontline tech support for Dell years and years and years ago, working call centers. And I started really getting interested into security when security wasn't, I would say, kind of front, the hot topic. But I started, getting more interest in it. I've moved to a financial institution, where I was starting to do a lot more of like network analysis before moving into working with Sonic Drive-In, working as an incident response analyst. Really got a lot of experience working with different franchisees and such, and all the while gaining more experience before heading off to an MSP, where we focused on delivering security services to critical infrastructure, financial institutions, and government contractors. So that led me to my current role, where my focus is anything on the technical side of space. So we handle anything from security engineering in terms of tooling. We handle day-to-day operations in terms of fielding specific requests from different teams or responding to threats. We do incident response, and then we also integrate very heavily in our development teams, so focusing on application security. So I would say that, in the recent hires that I've had, while we focus more heavily on more technical folks, just because that's the nature of the team, I do support also the hiring across our GRC teams and our lower level technical teams as well. And really, at the end of the day, as a hiring manager, my focus is more along the lines of what my other panelists have said, that looking for integrity, looking for somebody that has the drive and the eagerness to say what they need to say in a way that they're really focused on getting the job, and they can back it up with, here's what I can do, here's where my limitations are, and you can kind of get a really good understanding of who they are as a person. Oftentimes it's very easy to sniff out if somebody isn't exactly being honest and forefront with their answers. So we see a lot in this industry lately, unfortunately, where people come in and they feel like, well, I don't have any experience. So they kind of write off some of these, more entry-level jobs because they don't have experience, or they'll fake their resume to get into that first layer. But oftentimes, really, if you can get your foot in the door in that first interview and really stand out, that's what I'm looking for. I will say as well, we recently were hiring for a application security role in terms of like DevSecOps. And I really noticed that there's a lack of talent in that space currently in the market. We don't see a lot of folks with DevSec experience or have the capability to go out and do that application level security. So I'd say, for those of you that are looking to be in a more technical role, definitely think there's a lot of opportunity in that market.
Thanks, Austin. Awesome. Great. Well, such a epic panel. I mean, all of you have such a wealth of experience and interesting themes already coming out in terms of the type of candidates that you look for. I'm curious to hear more about that when we get to the interpersonal skills section of the Q&A. So with that said, everyone, we're going to move into the Q&A session and start moving through all these amazing questions that were sent through. So we're going to start with just the general overview of cybersecurity roles. Some of them have been mentioned, but maybe we can dive a little bit more into how do you define the different types of cyber roles that you might want to look at from an entry-level point of view. What are the different entry points into cyber? Who would like to share a bit more about what those roles are?
Yeah, I can kick it off. So, I think it depends on the avenue, of course. It depends on what you're interested in from a security perspective. There are many different routes you can take, some varying, in being the more technical side of things to less technical. We have a typical SOC analyst role that's entry level is focused more on day-to-day triage, fielding, tickets, understanding, alerts that might pop up. That's actually, one of the first roles that I landed, in the security space, but more focused on networking. So I was like a network analyst. You also have, the GRC space, which is governance, risk, and compliance. I've seen those teams be rolled up into one team as a whole in smaller organizations, or split out into each individual, layer across large organizations. But we actually fielded a new hire that was actually one of our interns last year that started out in the compliance space, fielding questions from our vendors and our clients, answering questionnaires, helping support that we, as the technical side of the fence, are complying to the technical requirements that our clients, want us to uphold. And then, the governance space, helping support the overarching cybersecurity program, establishing guidelines, working with executives. All those areas I've seen, have that kind of entry level opportunity, but have the capability for growth in those different roles, respectively as well.
Thanks. Anyone want to add anything? And go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I come from a financial institution perspective, and pretty much any role you do in cybersecurity within a bank, you're subject to very strict regulations. So what I've always sort of looked for is some degree of understanding of sort of a pure risk or audit/compliance background. It is it's teachable and something that, we can learn on the job, but it's a very uphill battle because it's very, very strict. So having a knowledge of not just, security principles, but sort of the risk approach to it, and also the regulatory side of it, is definitely a huge advantage. So honestly, I often hire people who have come from like audit or risk, versus having a purely security background. And honestly, a lot of the CISOs that we see go up the ranks have come from a GRC background, because in a GRC role, you have to look across the whole framework. And it's just a really good grounding, and it's a really good way to sort of have that full perspective, even if they're not as, say, technical as a pen tester or someone who's in the SOC with eyes on glass. So I think that's also a very good skill and background to have coming into the organization.
Fantastic. And our next question was around whether you needed an IT background to get into cyber, and it's sounding like that's a misnomer, right? Obviously, it can help for some of the technical roles, but it sounds like some of you have hired people from completely unrelated non-IT roles.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for some roles, I think you do need it, right? You couldn't walk in and just like red team, become a red teamer without some degree of training, right? But I think one thing that I do feel like, depending on how big your organization is, there's really a role for everybody in cybersecurity. I mean, we had COOs in there, we have people who do marketing for us, we have people who are graphic designers, it really depends on the type of role that you want. With cybersecurity has to have a budget, people have to have finance background. So like I said, you know, if you're a really, really technical role, you want to be in databases or, you know, threat intel, that kind of thing. Maybe there's a specific certification or background that you need to have, certainly like clearances, that kind of thing. But I do feel that there's opportunities for everybody in cyber. Yeah.
Great. EJ.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Anne's right? Like the biggest piece is just getting in the door, and I think it's important to note, like everyone here is looking for that way to get into cyber, but you can always just find a cyber company and apply, and then move laterally once you get into those things, right? Like I am in an MSSP, and to Anne's point, we have GRC, we have SOC analysts, but I have reporting analysts that have zero IT or cyber background, and their whole job is just to create PowerPoints initially. But three of them have then switched to SOC analysts over time because they've learned the skills they might need while doing their initial job, right? Threat intelligence and all the other backgrounds like marketing and things like that do come into play in a cyber company, and it can help you move positions laterally when you want to do that.
Thanks, EJ. That's a good point. Absolutely. We had a question specifically for some of the international students who are trying to get internships or jobs in cyber. What's been your experience with hiring international students, maybe who aren't based in the US or obviously in Australia, but all you guys are in the US?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. For me, it's pretty easy because we are follow the sun model. So we have offices in two other locations outside of the US, right? So we have a location in Belfast, and then we have a location in the Philippines or Manila. So for us, we do hire internationally, and it's still a remote position. You just have to kind of work it out of one of those offices, quote unquote. But I think it's common depending on regulations and requirements you have within your company, right? We do have two separate pieces because we have some US laws that we need to follow where our SOC is all US based. But then other customers don't have to abide by that. So we do use that model.
Got it.
Yeah,
And
I would. It's the same, you know, global companies, particularly in cyber. I mean, follow the sun model and, you know, can be accessed from anywhere. So limitations are not really about cyber, but more about the company and the jurisdiction they're in, and perhaps even tax laws. So I don't know that it's a cyber limitation, but more of a company limitation. And I would say that would apply to any industry, not just cybersecurity. Yeah, we hire graduates from you know, many locations actually. So.
right. Good to know. Okay, thank you. Hopefully that helps that person who was querying that. The other one I wanted to speak to you guys about is just we had a question about how to switch into cyber without being penalized for my age was the question that we had. So I'd love to get your insights into advice you can give someone who may be later on in their career but wanting to make that transition into a cyber role.
Yeah, I've gotten this question a few times over the course of my career. For a lot of folks, either one transitioning from one career path to another, or maybe just have taken a break to do life at home, take care of kids, and then are looking to re-enter the workforce. I've hired interns that were over 50. I often look at it, and what I tell people, even some of our candidates here at Harness, is it doesn't matter, how old you are or your background or where you're coming from. I care more about what your experiences are and how they translate to, the role and what you bring to the table as a human being, and, what insights you might have. You may have a background in construction. You may have a background in, as a nurse. But there are certain skills and certain attributes that still translate into the cyber field. They may not be technical. They may not be the know-how, from, you're not going to know how to pen test, right? But you have these soft skills that I think oftentimes are overlooked, and especially in technical roles that you really need to be successful. And oftentimes, coming from those other backgrounds and having that, just knowledge that you learn from experience and maturity helps.
Well said, Austin. Thank you. Cool. I wanted to move on to some other areas now. So we're going to talk about interpersonal skills in cyber careers. Um, you both referenced this, I think, organically in your introduction about some of the recent roles you've hired and what you're looking for. If you had to sort of pinpoint three really important behavioral personality type traits that you look for, I'd love to hear from each of you on that, actually. What would they be?
I mean, I can go first. I sort of did reference it in my intro because it's super important to me. In fact, I held a town hall today and I was referencing it again, but I build my teams based on sort of their work ethic and their commitment to integrity, right? You know, it fundamentally, you know, we're security professionals, so we're trying to stop the bad guys. So I don't want the bad guys on my team either, you know. And I like working with people of a similar mindset. So I like to create a team that works with honesty and integrity and authenticity at all times. And I do look for that as I'm interviewing and hiring people. So that's a very important trait for me, independent of what field you're going into in a hiring capacity. The second thing is like a can-do attitude, you know, willingness to learn and really push forward, you know, and help the rest of the team, teach them, learn from them, all of that kind of thing. I think that's super important. And then, you know, again, just I think yeah, the willingness to continue to work hard and you know, we're often up against very strict deadlines, and just being able to sort of you know, pitch in and make sure that all the other team members are supported as well. I just think that's super important. So they're sort of the soft skills, non-technical at all, but I feel like if I'm building a team of similar people like that, everybody's sort of in it together, and it does create a really great culture of sort of hardworking people who want to get the job done.
Thanks. EJ?
Yeah, I'll add two to that one. I think communication is really important, right? Like in cyber, you're going to be talking to people all the time, and being able to converse and be that gap, right? Or bridge that gap, I'm sorry, where the technical people don't understand those who are not technical, or vice versa. You being that middle person is really helpful there. And then the other one I would say is critical thinking. I think we've seen that a lot of cyber is experiencing something that has not happened before, right? So you can do all these certifications and all this training and all these programs, but if you're not willing to critically think and understand something outside of the box, you're not going to be able to fix some of these 0 days or other problems that come up. At the risk of making Austin laugh here, we used to have someone that we interviewed with a bunch, and he would ask people how they would change a light bulb in an empty room. And there was no right or wrong answer. And honestly, it was a terrible question, but it was a way just to see how an interviewer would look and think and try to figure out this thing. Would they ask questions? Would they make their own assumptions? Would they not? And I think that is really important when you're in this world.
Interesting. Thanks, EJ. Austin?
Yeah, you know, there's kind of two core, not just capabilities, but philosophies that I really look for. And I drive through my team. Number one being security through empathy. I believe that, you know, in order to get buy-in from an organization, you know, especially a smaller organization or mid-sized business, you can't be the ivory tower that goes and drives and says, do as I say, you know, this is the law, go and do it. Especially to developers, because more often than not, I'm going to say, I've been doing this my way for 15 years. You're not going to tell me how to do my job, right? It's better to kind of try and understand and, you know, have that empathy and understand where they're coming from, and try and solution out, you know, a middle ground. And anybody that joins my team has to have that mindset and has to drive that culture. because oftentimes if you can't get that buy-in, you're not gonna be able to drive the other important piece, which is influence, which goes into, what EJ and Ambo said, in terms of communication and being able to be authentic and drive that influence across the organization. Oftentimes, especially in small security teams, there's only one or two, maybe three individuals, and you can't do it all. There's only so many hours in the day. So you have to rely on other teams, other technical teams, non-technical teams to help drive security through awareness and training, through support. And if you can't influence those teams and build that relationship and build that rapport, oftentimes your security program is going to fail.
Thanks for sharing, Austin. That's great insights for everyone. I wanted to also speak to something that we notice a lot in the harness course, and particularly when we first speak to someone who's considering one of our programs. From the very first day, it sometimes is quite obvious to us who is going to excel and reach a really successful outcome, purely based on their personality and the behavioral approach they take to finding out about the program, how they participate during the program. Do they take opportunities for leadership? Do they collaborate well with others? These are all really evident in a project type of environment like ours. And so I always try to encourage students, you've got to really use the program as a way to put your best foot forward and develop in those areas, particularly for those who may be less inclined to take opportunities for leadership or to communicate broadly. These supportive project environments, particularly when you're in your education phase, are so important to give you that opportunity to hone that muscle so that when you get out into the workforce or your first interviews, you've had some experience and you can speak to it, and also the confidence starts to come from that repetition. So just something I wanted to share, because we really want to encourage every student to get as much out of our program as possible. And it really starts there. The training of the skills, like Anne said, a lot of it is important, but it can happen on the job as well. So starting with those harder to develop behavioral skills is a really good place to start to self-reflect on. Okay. So let's talk maybe briefly about showcasing some of these skills in an interview environment. What are some things that have stood out to you from candidates that you've interviewed over the years who might have really made a difference or separated themselves from other candidates in those interviews?
Yeah, so for me, we talked a lot about authenticity and integrity, and something I always, say is a green flag in an interview is oftentimes as a hiring manager, I'm going to push and see really how far I can go technically, to see if I can find, where you're at from a technical perspective. And so I'm going to ask very difficult questions. And I every single time will prefer somebody to say, I don't know the answer, but but I can figure it out, or, here's what I kind of know about that subject, but I don't know the exact answer, but here's what I do know. I would take that answer over really being able to sniff out somebody just trying to, wordsmith their way around, not really knowing it, or, rambling on, but never answering the question, because it just shows you don't know the answer and you're trying to lie to me, essentially, right? So, being authentic and saying, I don't know that answer, but here's what I do know is always going to be great. Green flag for me. From a technical perspective, I really appreciate as well when a candidate will not just, say, yes, I know the answer to this, but also give a scenario in how they've applied that technical knowledge, or how, a project related to that question that they did, because not only shows the answer, but it also shows that you can apply that knowledge as well. Oftentimes, especially if you're training for a certification or you take a course, you learn the basics and the foundations of it so you can answer a question, but being able to apply that knowledge in a way that is tangible is super important. And I think especially having like a portfolio or something you can showcase some of that work is also great.
Thanks, Austin. Great points. Anything to add there, EJ or Anne?
No, I actually agree with you. That's probably what stands out to me as well. You know, I may not know the answer, but here's how I would approach the you know, the solution versus trying to you know, indicate that you know something that you don't.
Always
So
obvious when someone tries to do that in an interview, and it's a bit awkward. Yeah, cool. Okay, let's jump to the next section, just to keep on track with time. So let's talk about certifications. This is a question that regularly comes up. Just maybe broadly, what's essential here, and how important are certifications in the job selection process? And does it vary, I guess, from role to role?
I think it definitely varies. Like all of the panelists have said, you know, depending on the type of role, you may need to be more or less technical. You know, you may not need to have cybersecurity background at all. So it really does come down to what type of role you want to do. You know, obviously there's some well-known certifications that you might need if you want to do something like pen testing or, you know, some of the more technical analyst type roles, but then on the more sort of surplus, you know, sort of governance side or risk and compliance side, you know, it may not be those type of certifications. I mean, a lot of the team members that I have, they have like a ISACA or CISA type certification versus a CISSP, you know. So yeah, I really think it's role dependent.
Totally. Yeah, Austin.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I think it varies on the type of role. It varies on, you know, the experience of the role required. You know, obviously, you know, if you try and apply to a staff security engineer with no certifications, no experience, it's going to be a difficult sell, right? But you know, I often tell people that a certification really stands in for experience. It makes it easier to get your foot in the door because I will say I know quite a few regulated industries or larger or, you know, organizations that may not have as experienced executive leadership will go and just say, what certifications does a security person need? Drop it on the requirement for the, you know, the job rec, and they follow that to the letter. So it does make it easier to get your foot in the door, but it's not a requirement. I am often looking for, in terms of, you know, a few things in terms of experience. Do certifications help? Yes. You know, oftentimes I'm looking for, you know, do they have a security plus as kind of a basic foundation from a security perspective? But that's, you know, if they have very little experience or no experience from a security standpoint. But I'd also be looking for, do they have a degree? Do they have a boot camp or some type of, you know, program such as Harness Projects there? Any tangible experience or have the, you know, something to showcase that you have the knowledge in the field is going to be valuable, whether it's a certification or hands-on experience.
Great. Thanks, guys. Anything else there, EJ?
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to say is also understand that a lot of times in smaller companies or even larger companies, they pay for some of these certifications once you actually get in. So you're better off, you know, trying to gain that experience that you can get through some of the other programs like Harness Project or some of these things where you get real world experience. And then when you come in, for instance, in my company, you know, we'll pay for your certification. And then there's certain certifications we run what's called spiffs at the time, and then we'll pay you not only to get the certification, but then a little extra money once you have it. And that's pretty common in this world.
And one other thing, just to remind for the students that are on this call, but also for those who might be considering our course, one thing we try and tell students is if you're really clear on the type of cyber role that you're trying to apply for, if it's GRC or if it's more of a technical role, a security analyst or not, have a look at the job ads that are out there and what certifications are included, and just be really targeted because there's a lot, right? You could spend a lot of time doing a lot of certifications. And in our program, to cater for that, We have partnerships with Pluralsight, TryHackMe, so you can do all the preparation material for all the different major security certifications that are out there. So once you're clear on what you want to do, you can do that in tandem with that program and have the experience and the certification when you graduate. So that's generally what we would advise. And we've seen some graduates who've done that and had really good outcomes when they've been targeted on the certifications, coupled with the experience they've gotten with us. Okay. So I guess just as hiring managers, when you're maybe in the application filtering process, because there's a lot of questions sometimes about how to get into that first interview. What are you looking for first, second, third in that resume, in that application, and how important is the certification in that filtering process for you?
Yeah, we're a smaller shop, so we don't have an ATS, but I know it's extremely common. I'd rather look at the resumes because I think ATS software kind of can be good and bad, right? You find diamonds in the rough a lot more when you don't have an ATS that's looking for something specific. But as we all know in today's world, there's a lot of applicants and not a lot of jobs out there, so people can be a little bit pickier. I don't look for certifications. We've kind of talked about a few of the things, but I look more for those soft skills, for an eclectic background, and just showing interest in that field, especially for my lower level entry positions. When you're talking at a level 2 or level 3 type person, then there's a lot more skill that comes into it, and it's pretty easy to read it off the resume. But in general, it's just understanding, what you're applying for, showing some value in knowing what the company's about, tailoring your resume to that role a little bit, and being able to answer questions when the time comes.
Thanks, EJ. And if you saw someone with just the certifications, maybe they went certification crazy and filled up their resume with those, but there wasn't any experience or related experience, what's your perception of those applicants?
It's a bit of a red flag for me. Um, I think Austin's off mute, so I'm sure he's going to say something similar. But it's tough when you just are getting all these certifications because now you're living in the theory world. And kind of what I mentioned before, right? You're going to see theory, but eventually you're going to find things that there is no theory for. So I'd rather see some experience or something where you're trying to work out real life scenarios rather than just grabbing all the certifications you can get. There's nothing wrong with certifications. I do think over time you're obviously going to see people that have a ton of it, but if there's no experience to back it up, it gets really tough to trust that that resume is going to have the experience you need.
So I
I'm
a
sorry.
little bit. Sorry, I was just going to say I have a different perspective. I used to be a lot like that, but then maybe I'm a little bit more empathetic to candidates now because I think it is a tough industry to break into, and the job market in general is not easy, right? And so in some ways, while you're not working, why not just do another certification and continue to learn, right? And so I try not to discard something just because it's a resume full of, because everybody has to start somewhere and somebody has to give someone a break at some time. I recently I was doing a course actually, and I recently met a lady who had a whole bunch of incredible certifications and degrees, like biotech and then programming and all this kind of stuff. And she had been unemployed, I think, for 18 months. And I thought to myself, how could someone with all this knowledge be unemployed? But she just didn't have a good presence with people. She wasn't a good speaker. She didn't know how to sell herself, but her knowledge was unbelievable. Like the amount of things that and I got to know her, so it was very easy for me to converse with her and everything, but she didn't know how to conduct herself in an interview or anything like that. So I don't know, I'm a little bit more empathetic to that resume. I'll give them a chance still, but obviously once you're in the interview, it's sort of all fair game. But yeah. I try not to silo it off like that.
Then, Austin?
Yeah, I'd say for me, I think it's hard to really put a person into a box, and that that's what ATSs do, right? They look strictly at what data is on the resume and they filter it out. I usually take a glance at least every resume that comes through an application, which or for a requisition, which can sometimes be over 100 resumes. So I see a lot of them. I think I care more about if you've misspelled a bunch of things and it looks kind of half rushed, I'm less likely to pull you in for an interview, right? But inherently, my risk factor isn't so much, oh, it's just a bunch of certifications. Maybe it's somebody that's fresh out of high school or college that just has a ton of resumes, no working experience. I wouldn't necessarily call it a red flag, but it's definitely gonna be more high risk. That's gonna be somebody definitely needed interview a bit more heavily and have some conversations around, see if from an interpersonal skills they're not going to have experience from an enterprise level. So those factors go into play. So it's not an easy just quick switch off. But I do think the more skills that a candidate's able to showcase, especially hands-on experience or some form of experience to say, hey, I can perform in this type of role, is going to be more impactful than what certifications they may or may not have. A great example of this is that I had an employee that worked for me a few years back that was extremely smart, had a ton of certifications, but just could not conduct themselves in a professional manner in the workplace. And it just was inherently one of those interpersonal skills that they couldn't grasp even after trainings, coachings. And oftentimes, we take a risk on somebody because they may have the tech smarts, or the street smarts, and you bring them on board, and it's a learning experience for both of us at the end of the day. But it kind of goes back to, you can have all the certifications in the world, but if you can't apply them, and you can't, you don't have the soft skills to back them up, you don't have any hands-on experience, it's less likely to work out.
Thanks, Austin. Are you guys aware of any certifications that focus on some of the more emerging AI tools in cyber? This might be more on the technical side, but curious if you've been across some of those trends.
Yeah, I've definitely worked with quite a few different AI tools. We've actually been, pushing very heavily on AI adoption in our organization because we're a heavy development shop, and we want our developers to be using these tools to, improve their day-to-day jobs and make things easier and more efficient. But I'm also concerned about potentially dropping proprietary information out on the web somewhere out there in a deep seek or something, right? So we were pretty aggressive in our adoption early on, and focused a lot across different, what tools are out there, how do we make it secure. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of vendors out there are going to say, oh, well, we're the one-stop shop, we're going to do it all for you. They're lying. No, nobody's ever going to be that one-stop shop, do it all. But what I think is interesting in some of the trends that I've seen is you can go buy all the technology in the world, but I think awareness and training is super important. And I think a lot of people are scared right now of, oh, my job's going to get taken away by AI, and I'm going to be redundant. And that's not necessarily the case. I think one of the biggest pieces we have to continue to drive as part of our awareness and training that we do in our organization is, it's not a tool to replace your thinking or to replace critical thinking. It is not something that you can just type in a prompt, take a response, and immediately send it out there. It requires validation. So I don't see, at least in my experience, anytime soon where we're going to be in a situation where you can just drag and drop and take AI responses and not have some form of validation or review without looking like a robot, at least.
Thanks, Austin. Good points. And did you have something to add, or?
No, I was just going to say there's a load of like great, even free courses that you can find on the web now to train in AI. it's evolving so fast, though, you know, the minute they publish a course, it's outdated by then, you know. I think there's a lot of learning that you can even just go to LinkedIn. There's a whole bunch of courses there that can be taken. And then, you know, I've started to see new courses pop up at like NYU and a bunch of the universities. So, you know, I think there's many that can be that can be taken. In fact, I had some consultants come and talk to me yesterday about ISO has put out a new certification for organizations on responsible AI. So it's something that I'm looking into right now for us. But yeah, there's a bunch of new stuff coming out.
Yeah, I think it's really
There'll
important.
be regulations not too distant.
Yeah, totally. It's really important, I think, especially the use of AI in an organization and knowing that ahead of the time. I think if you're going into interviews and can speak to your understanding of those, you know, that world, I think could go a long way for people. Okay, we're gonna now move into talking about experience and projects and the importance of them, how to get them, these sorts of things. So I guess I would love to get maybe an initial bit of feedback from you all around some of the differences that you notice from those who have some applied experience versus others, and what would your tips and advice be for those who don't have the experience yet?
I mean, I think, like I said before, everybody has to start somewhere. I think, you know, truthfully, if you don't have the experience, be humble and just take it as a learning exercise, because the more that you do that, the more you will, you know, grow and learn, and soon you'll be teaching somebody else. So I think I think that you know, the opportunity to learn is just as great as going in there with, you know, significant experience, assuming that you're not trying to be a CISO or something. So I don't know. I think there's, you know, there's opportunities to just, you know, not have all of the skills at the, you know, the initial onset of your career. You have to have opportunities to learn along the way. So I would just say be honest about where you are, and try and absorb as much as you can from those around you that do have the experience.
Good point, Sam. Thank you. Anything else to add, guys? No. EJ?
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of ways to gain experience without working at a place now. You know, a lot easier than 5, 10 years ago, right? You've got solutions like Try Hack Me or Hack the Box that have GRC like channels or SOC analyst levels to do these things for some of those entry level positions. But even if you don't do those, you know, every SIM or SOAR or solution has some type of training you can take, right? And a lot of them are free. FortiSIM is a good example. They have their trainings and it's free, and you don't need to pay anything or have a special account or something like that. And yes, that's one random solution in a sea of a million, but it just shows you're trying to gain that experience, right? And I think that's the most important thing for myself is understanding, okay, you may not have that real world experience from a position prior, but you're trying to gain that experience. I also talked about GitHub and people, you know, doing commits and making sure they're in there every day or every couple days working on something. It just shows you have an interest, and it puts you a step above someone else who doesn't have that experience, but maybe isn't working as hard to learn as you are.
Austin, go for it.
Yeah, I was just to add on that, you know, I think one piece that's often overlooked is especially like networking. You know, I mentor a lot of the students that we've had come through, you know, Harness that have since graduated, and I'm still a mentor for them. And you know, I tell people go join Discord, you know, Discord servers that are focused around cybersecurity and blue teaming and red teaming, what you're interested in, and build that network around you, because you're going to find opportunities, whether it's just collaboration, specific training courses, like EJ said, you know, around specific tools, and you know, there's a lot of opportunities out there that I found just from having a diverse network. And, I drive that down to those that I'm mentoring, whether it's somebody in my company or something, like I said, some folks that, have stayed with me after harness projects that I keep in touch with. So, I think, because oftentimes I see this question all the time. Well, how do I get my foot in the door? How do I, get these skills, or, what do I do after harness? And I tell them every time that, that's only going to get you so far. I think networking is the other piece that you have to keep in mind of building that uh, group of peers around you. Because oftentimes, like EJ said, we met each other 6, 7 years ago, and we still keep in touch, and we, often collaborate and share resources. And both of our careers have grown just from that, having that relationship.
Thanks, guys.
One last little harness project comment here is that I also recently hired someone from the harness project from my last cohort. He finished, and Austin knew him prior and got him into the harness project. And then when he finished his fourth project, he interviewed, and he's one of my SOC analysts now. So that networking helped him a ton.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And guys, maybe just for Austin and EJ, because you've delivered projects, and your first one is coming up. But I'd love to hear, just maybe for the audience's benefit, what is the project experience like for the students that you mentor? What are they doing? What's the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, I've led a few different projects, from risk management to web application testing, as well as infrastructure scanning. And, across all those projects, we have a range of candidates that some have a lot of technical experience, some have none technical experience. And, really those first couple sessions are focused more on not just kind of diving through the foundations and the basics, but it's also me learning who you are as a student, you learning who I am as your mentor. And as we kind of navigate the first couple sessions, we often, times will set up, one-on-ones, 15-minute sessions throughout the week, where we'll engage, interpersonally. Oftentimes those discussions have either been around the project to answer any questions that maybe they didn't get answered during the workshop, or maybe it's more just, kind of like that mentor conversation around, I have kind of an idea of what I want to do with my career, but not really. Can you help guide me? So I've had those conversations as well. But I think, the overarching, theme of these projects is you're getting a first world view into working on a real security project with a real client. And, throughout it all, we're prepping you for that conversation with that stakeholder. We're walking you through with the foundations, what you need to know, as well as the training that happens outside of the workshop that you're doing throughout the week as well. And so I've seen, candidates come through the projects that I've mentored where they've come in with no technical skill. Some of them, this is their first, entry into the real world, right? They're coming out of high school or college. And by the end of our course, they feel a lot more confident. They've learned technical tools. In some cases, they're scanning applications and, looking at vulnerabilities and doing all this cool things, that they've only seen in, like movies and TV shows. So, I think it's very impactful. It's helped me grow as a mentor, but I've seen a lot of different people from a lot of different walks in life, go through this and come out the other side a lot stronger of a candidate.
Thanks for sharing, Austin. Awesome to hear it from your mouth. Cool. EJ, anything to add, or Austin?
No, I think Austin said it all there. I think the coolest part is being able to work on a real life project, like he said. And it's just getting a different experience. Even me having worked in the field for 15 years or so, it's interesting to see it from the side of not only, startups and smaller businesses, but these are people that may be a 5-person company and not thinking about security at all. And the questions that students ask are ones that I might not have even thought of, because you've just been doing it so long, not jaded, but you just have a lot of other questions to ask, and they ask some great questions, and I've taken some of them in my toolbox and brought them back to the company.
I'd particularly liked some of your style, EJ, where you bring a lot of the day-to-day experiences you're having at work into the workshop experience. I remember a lot of students sort of speaking to that as being one of the most engaging parts of the sessions. I was pulling a recording the other day, and I, for some reason, I caught you guys speaking about bunkers in the mountains. I don't know if you recall that conversation. It's like the diversity of conversations.
Yeah, I don't really remember how that came up, but yeah, we went way off the rails in that class. But it was kind of fun to see some of the thoughts and different things that people have when it comes to physical security. That's how that started, was a physical security question. But yeah, it ended up that the only place to be safe would be a bunker in the mountains somewhere.
Yeah, I had to do a double take, but love it. Cool. Let's move on to a day in the life of a cyber professional. So what is it like for some of your entry-level team members? What are they doing during the day? What's being asked of them? Is there a lot of meetings? Is it a lot of screen time? Is it having to think a lot? Just yeah, all in the above.
Yeah, I can go first on this one. SOC analysts have a pretty eclectic day most of the time, especially level ones. They're answering tickets. They could be calling customers if it's a higher or critical. They could be working with a more senior analyst on something that they haven't seen before or haven't worked on, pulling reports, pulling things, and there's not too many meetings for SOC analysts initially, or at least they would hope not, because usually if they're meeting with a customer, it means something happened and there's a fire that they have to either put out or calm a customer down about, for the most part. But in general, any of the SOC levels, there's no particular day where it's the same thing every single day. Yes, they're answering tickets, but every ticket is different, and we have 400 plus customers, so they're dealing with different customers in every single ticket and a different way to do things. So it gets you a lot of experience in a short period of time for a SOC analyst.
Thanks. And what about your team?
Yeah, so I have so many different functions under me that it looks different for everybody. So in my regulatory team, if they're in the middle of an exam, they're probably in at 7 and working back to back until 10 or 11 that night, turning around requests for the exam. So it's very, very full on. But if you're not in an exam, you would definitely not be working those long hours, right? We would be preparing and working for preparing the people that are actually speaking in the exams and that kind of thing. And in the downtime, they would be sort of working with our SMEs to gather responses and make sure that they're all sense checked before they go off to or a regulator, etc. Other team members who might be, building training and awareness packages. So, their day would be doing research, looking at different ways to, to sort of ensure that, our messages get out. In big organizations, unfortunately, there's also a lot of bureaucracy. So you are in meetings a lot, trying to gain consensus. And that's definitely a soft skill that, I think people need to be able to have, which is, bringing teams together and, sort of generating a mutual understanding of things. A lot of what one of the other panelists said before, bridging the gap between security and sort of business speak occurs with, actually across most of my teams, because we're sort of the middle ground with a lot of that. We're very meeting heavy, unfortunately. Some people like that, some people don't. I actually do. Sometimes I'm very exhausted by the end of the day, but it does keep you busy. It goes pretty quickly. But I try to expose our junior team members to as much of that as we can. And I'm certainly, not the person who doesn't, allow the team members to speak up or run a meeting or anything like that. Sometimes it's sort of maybe sort of pushing their boundaries a little bit to see how far they can go. So yeah, it's always a very busy day.
Thanks, Sam. Austin, any differences for your team members?
Yeah, so our team is a little bit different because we're kind of more of a strike team, right? We're handling the fires, the incidents, but we're also handling application security and helping development. So I have a junior on my team that I recently hired, and their focus is really more around building those relationships with those development teams, sitting in on stand-ups or demos and walking through new features and helping them threat model. And so, a lot of that is me, hopping on those calls and helping support. They may not know all the answers, especially as a junior analyst, but helping them, navigate those issues, walking through those threat models and understanding, hey, we're introducing this new authentication method or this new feature to this application. How can it be attacked? What happens if if somebody tries to exploit this certain bug or this feature, right? What would happen? So walking through those scenarios, typical day-to-day alert review and response, whether that's somebody clicked on a phishing email or maybe somebody gained access to a highly privileged role and we need to go and make sure that that's legitimate and they're doing it for a business use case. Helping navigate those access packages, as we call them. So it's a lot more technical, hands-on, just because we are an engineering team. But there are plenty of meetings to go around. I'm in meetings all day. I try to shield my team from a lot of that, but inherently, when you're working in, especially with development teams, there's a lot of stand-ups to be involved in, and DevSecOps calls and things like that.
Right. Thanks, guys. So just, I guess, last thing on the day in the life of a cyber professional, what are some of the challenges that they might encounter in their first 6 months of working that they'll have to be prepared to deal with? It might be information overload, or it might be a feeling of not fitting in. How do you guys mentor and guide people through that process in their first 6 months?
I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, I think for me, a lot of what I spoke about before in terms of the way that I build my teams sort of answers that question. My team members are really supportive of each other, and I feel that that's really sort of, it is unique, so you won't find that everywhere. But I think in our role, the most overwhelming part is the volume and pace that we work at. And, nobody has to know everything from the beginning, but you have to be willing to try and keep up with the pace. I think that's probably the most challenging. That said, like, other people are there to help you. And so we sort of do try to allocate like a buddy to sort of new people, to sort of guide them a little bit. We've built orientation manuals, and I really focused my team over the last year on building procedures, desktop procedures, so that if someone new does come in, they can pick that up and follow it. I know it's much more common in sort of like a SOC or something like that, because you've got all your playbooks and everything. But from a GRC perspective, how to run an exam or how to execute a control test is a little bit different. So just even having those small desktop procedures is useful for people. But yeah, I think for us, it's really just the pace and volume that's coming in that is concerning to people, because nobody's going to know everything, but that side of things we can learn. It's just being able to cope with the influx.
Great. Austin?
Yeah, I think to follow up on that, right? I think oftentimes, especially for our team, we wear a lot of hats. We do a lot of different roles, and so what typically I see is burnout, not from not knowing all the technical. I think Ann said it best, right? I can teach the technical, but coping and learning, drinking from the fire hose in a sense for that, especially the first 6 months is critical. And oftentimes if certain candidate doesn't have the stress management, skills to kind of tackle some of that initial hurdle. I think, is where I see a lot of downfall and a lot of challenge. But at the same time, I think, it's the mind over will, right? You get in your head and you're like, oh, I'm messing up, I'm not doing things right, and it's easy to kind of bog yourself down. And that's where I have to kind of step in and have conversations to say, let's take it one step at a time. Rome wasn't built overnight. Let's, slowly build our way up to that. Because, I know for me personally, if I join an organization, I want to be, contributing from day one, and you want to do all the things, and you want to be a rock star. And it's easy to, when you're met with challenge or failure, to, kind of struggle with that. So I think all that to say, oftentimes, at least with my candidates, it's less about the technical, because again, I'm there to support you from a technical perspective. Any manager, or director that you're under should be there to support you from the technical perspective. You're not expected to know everything out the gate, unless maybe it's like a super high, specialized, tier role, right? But it's usually like the stress management and trying to learn all the different processes and procedures that I see people challenge with.
Thanks, Oscar. Okay, great. So, guys, I wanted to ask you just about a question, a very specific question for someone who I think is probably quite common. For those who have been applying for jobs consistently but not getting callbacks, what would be the first thing you'd suggest they review in terms of their approach? Because we do hear of that. People sometimes don't get callbacks, don't even know why. And so they're a little bit in the dark of what to do about it.
You know what? I can add some insight here. So I mentioned before, part of my career was, I worked at SVB before I came to Bank of Mellon. So, when was it? I guess March of 23, when SVB went down, I found myself without a job, and I had to start applying for roles. And so I understand that situation. And one thing I would say is there's many ways to apply for a job. And, I think a lot of people go to these online applications and they fill them out, and then they go into the recruitment black hole, and then you never hear back. But that's exactly what's happening. It's trigger words, etc., in these databases that for whatever reason, they don't pick out that particular, and it's not actually it's not actually the candidate, it's this automated process. So to be honest, like, I'm not even really a fan of those applications. The way I think it is the best way to get a foot in the door is to know someone and to sort of, talk to them and sort of, find out what's available, and, maybe look on the website, see a role that's available, go to LinkedIn, see who you know at that organization, offer to buy them a coffee, offer them to have a chat, 5 minutes on the phone. Through that period that I was unemployed, which ended up only being 2 months, should have taken some more time. But I sat down at my desk 8 hours every day, the same way I would when I would go to work each day. And I filled my day with talking to people. And I never felt that any single one of those conversations was not useful, because I would have a conversation with someone who totally not in my field, or, but it would lead me to a conversation with someone else, or it would prompt me to think of something in a different way that I would use in a different conversation with someone else. So I think the most important thing in job searching is talking to people. And even that person who you think might be able to get you a job might not be useful, but they might lead you to someone else. So I honestly think that is truly the best way. And I'm not discouraging people from applying through those websites, but I don't think it's the main way that people get jobs around the industry anymore.
Really interesting, and thanks for sharing your personal experience. And with the people you spoke to, were these connections that you had already made, or were you trying to establish new connections through networking events? What was the way of brokering those human connections?
Yeah, I think I think both. I'm not someone who loves to go to conferences and that kind of thing. I guess I'm a little introverted from that perspective. I mean, technically I love to go and talk to people about technical things, but I'm not a, networker just for the sake of it. So I don't necessarily find it that way. I think most of the people that I knew were either just socially my own circle, who may not even be in my industry. I know a lot of people in finance, but not necessarily in cyber. So I might talk to people at those banks that I knew and say, do you know the people in your cyber department? Would you be willing to introduce me to the person in that role? Or, hey, have you spoken to that person, or have you had that connection? So, there was a lot of that. I also at one point made a list of every organization that was of interest to me. And then I went to LinkedIn and I looked up those organizations. Do I know anyone there? Do I know anyone in that role there? And then I would just send them a message. And sometimes you can't get through to them. Sometimes they don't reply to you. But I just kept being persistent, to be honest. And, in many ways, that's a bit of a law of probability. You have to be willing to keep getting that. And, the truth is there is a lot of knockbacks, and it's not necessarily a black mark on you or your skills. It's what's needed in the industry and at that company at the time. Even in life, you're not friends with everybody. There's a great fit with some of your friends. There's not a great fit with people you meet, and they won't be your friend for life. It's sort of the same thing in jobs, or that's the way I look at it anyway. So there is a lot of sort of persistence and, picking yourself up. But you just have to keep going, because nobody's just going to hand it to you. And if they do, it may just be too good to be true.
Really great insight. Thanks, Sam. Anything to add, guys?
Yeah, I'd say I'm a little bit of the opposite of Anne in that I love going to conferences. I think networking is so useful in this, in this piece here. But it's, I think that's a big thing for people to do too, especially if you haven't been getting callbacks or you haven't getting responses, is just network, right? You can find conferences local, online, and meet people similar to some of the people asked, for LinkedIn here. You just met 4 panelists that, now you have some type of connection with and could help you get jobs. But most of the time, to Anne's point, is like in LinkedIn, you see all these jobs that have been posted forever, and they may not even actually be there anymore. So you're applying to something that you think and hoping for, but they're not a live position anymore. But if you have these networks, a lot of people now, instead of posting it on LinkedIn as a job, they just post it in a chat, right? They'll say, hey, I'm hiring for 3 positions or doing this or doing that. And you'll see a mountain of responses. But if you're connected with them and speak with them, you have a better chance than just applying to jobs and not having that connection, right? So I think Anne is completely right in that, right? Networking is huge for us. This is a small community still, compared to some of the other jobs and some of the other positions out there like sales and marketing. So it's very easy to know and meet other people here and use that to jump yourself forward.
Thanks, CJ. Austin?
Yeah, just the common theme, you're right, is networking. To tie on to the conference side of things, right? I know when I go to Black Hat or DEF CON every year, they even have some booths where they do interviews, right, for some of these startup businesses or certain security service providers that they're doing. They're hiring people right there in the middle of the conference. So there are opportunities there, but I tell people too that I agree with Ann. We kind of see this shift away from typical like going on Indeed and just filling out a bunch of resumes. Majority of the time for my recs lately, I'm going through a recruiting firm. So working with recruiters, building those relationships on that front, and they can help source you, because they work with multiple companies that are hiring. So that's definitely a great opportunity to get your foot in the door with a recruiter that can then present you to those organizations directly to the hiring manager. I also think I talked a bit about like Discord groups, right? There's one that's like cyber job hunting that I'm part of, where oftentimes people worldwide will post open jobs and say, hey, I'm looking for this skill set, I'm looking to fill this role. And while it's a Discord group filled with a ton of different people, that subgroup of people is going to be a lot less, or a lot easier to navigate and get your foot in the door than 100, 200, 300 random people applying to an Indeed website, right? So there's some opportunities across those different avenues, but it all ties back to networking in one way, shape, or form is important.
Thanks, guys. I mean, it sounds like that human connection is key. However you find it, trying to showcase who you are to the right person, the right time. So it's a numbers game, but it's also a humans game, it sounds like. So hopefully that helps everyone who's having that issue at the moment. We're going to go to the last topic for the webinar. This is just around future trends, AI. Obviously there's a lot in the media about this, and probably a lot of apprehension across many industries for people thinking about, how to protect their careers and these sorts of things. But I'd love to get some of your insights into the trends that you're seeing, the opportunities. I know, Austin, you wanted to speak a bit about DevSec. So yeah, let me know if you've got some thoughts to share here.
Yeah, I touched on it, earlier in kind of my intro, but, I think where we see a lot of gap in the market right now, from my perspective, is that DevSecOps, very technical role that does require a little bit of coding, but it doesn't require full in-depth knowledge of all the different, coding languages and platforms. It's more about scripting, right? It sounds daunting, but I will say that there are dime a dozen people looking for opportunities and entries into the field. And while DevSec isn't always going to be something you can jump into with no experience, it's definitely something that I think a lot more people should strive for, because I can't tell you how many folks I've engaged with and say I'm looking for somebody that has experience working with development teams, that has experience working with Terraform, Ansible, doing deployments into application environments. Do you know the lost top 10? Like, very basic things at times that you would think, because we even talk about the lost top 10 as part of harness projects, right? But the vast majority of candidates that I'd interview that even would say that they had that experience wound up not really understanding the core principles of secure development and SDLC life cycles. So, my advice would be that if you are looking for more of a technical role, learn to kind of look at that avenue as potential opportunity, because I definitely feel, at least here on the East Coast, it's definitely lacking.
Thanks, Austin. And
I don't know that I've got any more to add to this. I think you guys have covered it really well.
well, no worries. EJ, any comments on AI and future trends in cyber?
Yeah, the one thing I think that's huge right now, and for anybody who looks at my LinkedIn, you'll see I've been an avid fighter of this, is that people are saying AI are going to take cybersecurity jobs, especially like the level 1 SOC analyst or the low level GRC analyst. And I think that is not exactly the truth. And I think anybody who is looking to do that is going to be missing one of the most important elements of cyber, is that human experience, or that human expertise that like can look at something and determine if it's actually a true positive or a false positive without being bound by some of the AI rules that come around, right? So I think AI is not going to necessarily take jobs. I think it's just going to help those lower level people. You can ask ChatGPT or Perplexity or any of these things to help you review some type of case or something you've seen, and it'll give you all this experience and background from all these other cases, but it can't give you the answer that you're specifically looking for, that someone needs to be able to infer from that data, right? So I think it's important to understand that, because there are a lot of people that are scared of that right now and worried that AI is going to take their job. And maybe it will for certain categories, but I just don't think it's going to be that case for cyber just yet.
Interesting. I had a conversation late last week, with one of our other cyber mentors, and he's been recruiting for a new role. And he interviewed a software developer who was looking to get into cyber. And he asked that software developer in the interview if he had ever used any AI tools to assist with his coding. And he said, no. He says, I hand code everything. And the feedback he gave that candidate was that you need to be able to do both, because these tools are increasing the productivity of coders and of people who are in that world. And to not be fully across those is seen as a gap from a hiring point of view. So one of the things we try and tell our students is AI is meant to increase your capacity and capabilities, not as a replacement, but something that if you have the foundational knowledge of cyber, and it can do the critical thinking in between all of the knowledge parts and bring it together to then bring on a tool like AI, or any tool for that matter, to deliver a better outcome, or more efficient outcome, then that's the way to think about it. And so get to know the tools, get curious. Someone was asking earlier about curiosity, and that's a perfect example of just staying abreast of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just to add to that, there were quite a few talks in this last year at Black Hat and DEF CON, and we obviously took a lot of it to heart because we were in the middle of an AI adoption and transformation in our own organization and bringing it to developers. But a few core things that I took away from as we've seen AI, machine learning kind of taking the market, right? One is there's a lot of sensationalism out there and sensational articles that are saying, oh, your job's going to get replaced by AI. Kind of like Chris said, we tell the developers this is to help enable you and make you more efficient and help drive secure coding. It's not a replacement. But the other side of that is, while we've seen some threat actors and bad guys in a sense, right, who have used AI to make more efficient phishing campaigns, oftentimes everybody's immediately leans to, oh, AI is the new gaping hole in security, and they're going to use it to find ways to hack your AI tools. And really, I mean, people still aren't even implementing MFA, multi-factor authentication into their their workforce and their tools. So it just kind of goes to, don't skip the basics to try and go right to the most advanced thing in the world, right? Because most organizations still aren't even getting the basics right. So there's still a lot of things to tackle in the AI market, but I think it's a great time to hop into the security space while people are still adopting and growing it, because it's still evolving and it's still changing. I think there is going to be opportunities in the next few years where we're going to see security teams innovate extensively in the AI ML space.
Very cool.
Yeah, there's like something for everybody in the space, so you can use it for your DevOps or, offensive security. But, I'm using it right now to mine through, reams of old regulatory records and pull back the most recent answer and develop it for me so that I don't have to click through 3,000 SharePoint files, So it's got so many different uses to different, different job roles. It's interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was from a founder of a podcast, I guess, channel like Spotify kind of thing. And he was just talking about how when journalists started to transition to podcasts from media, so obviously there was a transition from paper to television, or to radio, then television, etc. And there was this real pushback from people when podcasts started to come out. And he made a point about, in the industry, people have to adapt or they sort of die out, right? And I thought about it in the context of our industry, right? AI is now the next thing. Like, you do have to figure out how to adapt and how to use it to your advantage. And otherwise, you may get left behind, because it's sort of the way that every job is going to use it in some capacity here. So, and there'll be something else after AI. It'll be quantum or whatever it is, So it's going to happen your entire career. So you have to be really willing to learn what that new thing is at all times.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point, Sam. Well, thank you, everyone. I'd love to maybe get a few exit comments from you all if there's something that you haven't been able to speak about that you'd love to share with the audience. Final tip, whatever it might be, feel free, and we'll wrap up after that.
I would say just be persistent, particularly in light of like the job comments and everything. I think cybersecurity will always be a super important industry. There's a lot of talk about, will regulations change and will we have, less work there, etc. I don't think it's going to happen in our industry. I think, it's only going to be more and more important. So just be persistent. Talk to as many people as you can, be willing to learn, be open, learn from every source that you can. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Awesome.
Yeah, someone who's had a lot of a lot of students come through the harness projects and been a mentor a few times. I could say that I have yet to meet someone that didn't put in the time, the effort, and the energy into the course and come out the other side and not be a successful candidate. Whether we're imparting our knowledge from our day-to-day jobs, like Chris said, EJ talks about bunkers in the mountain, right? But oftentimes I find myself going off topic in the workshops, not in terms of non-security related, but I'll be talking about what's going on at work for me and how it translates to the curriculum. And so, we're talking about real world aspects in the program, as well as working on improving on soft skills. One of the things I talk to in the course is the first kickoff call. I ask, where do you feel like your strong points are and where do you feel like your weak points are? And throughout the course, I'm looking for opportunities and ways to help support your growth from a soft skills and that attitudinal, competency perspective. So, think of this as we're not just here to teach you the technical, but also teach you the core skills and philosophies that you need to be a successful candidate in the workforce, and really give you that kind of that leg in the door that most candidates, whether coming out of college or just having certifications, aren't going to have, which is that real world experience and a mentor that works in the space to help support you.
Thanks, Austin. EJ, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's all good comments that Austin and Ann made. I would say I think I've done 2 or 3 mentorships with the Harness Project, and the courses have been really cool. It's something I didn't have the luxury of when I was starting out, right? So I think it's really helpful. And I agree that just stay at it, right? This can be a very frustrating field. It can be a very tough to get a job field, but it's really rewarding, and I think it's a lot of fun. So don't let anybody or anything discourage you. Just keep attacking it and keep trying to learn more and grow, and you will absolutely get a job and succeed in the cyber field. It's mostly about willpower at that point, right? Like Austin said, like Ann said, the technical can be taught, but your willpower and your self knowledge will get you extremely far.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to speak to us about this cyber world. We're very grateful to have all of your input from the wealth of experience that you guys have accumulated over the number of years you've been in this industry. So I hope everyone got a lot of value out of that. We will be sending a recording out, but feel free to get in touch with us if you'd like to speak a little bit more about your particular goals and our cybersecurity career launcher program. Until then, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.